Doug Williamson is the Chief Executive Officer of the Beacon Group. Throughout his 30-plus year business career, he's been actively involved in initiating positive, transformational change inside many different organizations of all sizes and across all industries. He brings a global mindset, along with strategic orientation, insightful experience, and thought and practice leadership to every business relationship. Soundview is very pleased to welcome the author of Straight Talk on Leadership, Mr. Douglas Williamson. Doug, welcome to Soundview Live.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to everyone that's online here. Let me set the scene. My objective today, I want to share some ideas. I want to share some ideas that I hope will make a difference at three different levels. At the business level, organizational level, the leadership level, and also at the personal level. But I'm also here to poke the bear. I want to be provocative. I want to stimulate your thinking, and I'd like you to come away with this maybe even a little bit rattled. It's the straight talk piece of my personal leadership philosophy, which suggests that the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line, and sometimes being candid and being straight is the only way to do, if not the best way to do. My objective over the next hour is to debunk some popular myths, puncture some of the folklore that I believe is out there when it comes to leadership. And I'd like to alter some points of view because I think we're at a moment in society where we need to shake up our thinking. So what you can expect are some bold alternative ideas. Some of them may disturb you, in which case I'd be happy to answer questions. But at the end of the day, I want to provide some brain food to shake the cobwebs. It's also important as we go through this to be thinking about perspective, and I want to give a perspective that I think is relevant to the very crazy times in which we live and relevant to business and business leaders. I want to talk about the situation we face as leaders, no matter at what level in whatever organization. I want to talk about the changes that have taken place, and more importantly, the changes that are on the horizon and are yet to come. And I believe this is important because these seismic shifts that we've felt, these fundamental shifts, we ain't seen nothing yet. Any economist, business leader, politician, university professor probably would be saying today that there is more to come. So I want to focus in on three issues that are linked. I want to talk about leadership, I want to talk about followership, and want to talk about human capital and weave the story between those three. I'd like to start at the end of it, if you like, and give you a summary, and then we'll loop back. So let's start with the issue of leadership. I think we should be way more concerned than we currently are about leadership. You know, great leadership is a precious and very scarce natural resource. We just don't have enough of it, and that would be true no matter where you looked at all levels. To make it even worse, the type of leader that we need has changed, and that's changed because the context has changed, because the times have changed. And I think what I see as I travel the world is way too many people, way too many leaders holding on to the past, to the old model, kind of holding their breath or even holding their nose, hoping that this bad smell is going to pass, and the fact of the matter is it's not. We're into a new normal. There's a new set of leadership competencies for the future that is beginning to emerge, but I don't think that most people understand what they are. And lastly, business is simply not doing enough to grow the next generation of leaders. I think it might be fair to say that we have a serious leadership deficit. It may even be a leadership crisis. Issue number 2 is the issue of followership. I think there's a huge common misunderstanding about leadership. We tend to view leadership through only one end of the telescope. We're fixated on leadership as though it's the magic holy grail. Yet we fail to understand followership and understand the relationship between leader and follower. And in that followership category, I want to put forward the premise that middle management is actually the most important followership community, and that middle management are kind of the forgotten masses. The middle management's getting constantly squeezed. Middle management doesn't get any attention. They don't get any love. And we're not giving middle management enough of the big, bold ambition to visions to kind of follow. And so I think we have a second deficit, and I think it's the deficit of ambition. Thirdly, human capital. Human capital is more important now than it's ever been, and it's always been important. But we need to modernize our thinking. Far too many leaders today have still a much too primitive understanding of the human capital balance sheet. They're just not sophisticated enough in the modern understanding of human capital. And we haven't made the same strides in human capital that we've made, for instance, say, in technology or in science. And the risk here is that if we don't enhance our understanding of human capital, we risk alienating a whole generation of young people, and that would be really, to coin a phrase, a crime against humanity. So that's the general point I want to put out today. There are 5 messages that I want to deliver, and so we'll loop back and I'll go into these in a little bit more detail. Message number 1, Mahogany Row is dead. Mahogany Row is that idea that wisdom comes from the depth of experience that you have and the tenure you have, and that is wrong. That is not where wisdom comes from. Wisdom comes not from a small group of people sitting behind these great big mahogany desks on the top floor of an office building. Real wisdom comes from the width, the breadth, and the variety of experiences. It really comes from your experience repertoire. So I believe the era of the deep expert is dead, and we're on the cusp of the comeback of the generalist. Because it's not so much what you know, because what you know today has a very limited shelf life. It's expiring very quickly. But it's about what you can learn. And so in the modern definition of wisdom, it's about your rate of absorption. It's about how quickly you can collect your insights, how you can synthesize and simplify very complex messages. And it's why networks and relationships matter, and that it's the access to people and insight that becomes the key. It's not the storage of the knowledge. It's the ability to access what you need in real time. And it's why the social media thing is anything but a teenage fad. It really is the enabler to make everything available to everyone 24/7, 365, virtually for free. But what this marks is it marks the end of the cult of the superhero. That charismatic superhero leader isn't the way that sustainable success is created, this love affair that we've had with charisma over time has actually turned out to be more like Viagra. It's an artificial stimulant, but it's not what makes great leaders great. Message number 2. Back to leadership being a scarce natural resource. So the supply of great leaders is short, the demand for great leaders is high, so we have scarcity value. That's a basic economic principle. And leadership today, more than ever, is about questions and answers. It's about decisions and choices, and it's about new answers to old questions and new questions, and the quality of the new questions in order to get to the new answers. And the race is on, no matter where you are in any part of the world, in any industry. The race is on to see who will find the answers first. But today, and certainly since 2008 and the economic downturn, way too many business leaders are down in the weeds, when in fact they should be up in the clouds. They should be scanning for opportunity. Message number 3. Middle management matters most. Middle management is the fertile heartland of organizational life. Middle management is where wealth is created, where innovation happens, and middle management should be the number one constituency inside the modern organization. What really matters in an organization that seeks to be high performance is not what the senior executives think, it's what the middle managers think. And middle management today in far too many companies is being mismanaged and misled. And there's a price that will be paid for that at some point. It's what Art Kleiner called in his great book, the core group. It's within the middle management, that group of influencers and deciders, those people, not because of their tenure or their seniority or their education, are the real influencers, the go-to people. They're the equivalent of the swing voters in an election. You know, you have camps that are never going to change their opinion, but the most important constituency is that middle constituency, that swing voters, and that's where middle management really matters, and it's the source of driving material change. It's the source of how you create transformation in an organization. And what we're doing today is we're squandering the value that we have invested in people in general, but in middle managers in particular. We're not getting the return on investment that we could or we should, and we're hurting ourselves in the process. We're shooting ourselves in the foot, but no one seems to care, or at least not care enough. Message number 4. Followership is underappreciated and misunderstood. Go ahead, do a Google search. Type in business leadership, and you get 766 million hits. Type in the word followership, and you get 484,000 hits. Leadership always has been about willing followers. All great leaders have one thing in common, and it's willing followers. And I'm not talking here about robots, but there's something important about the leader's ability to create followership, and it's that competency, the competency to create followers, that is way more important than charisma. Credibility, a leader's credibility, is the currency that the leader uses and needs to get followers. And it's always been about the intrinsic motivation, not about the extrinsic motivation. It's always been about volition and discretion. It's never been about getting willing followers through money or promotion. And credibility, if you think about it for a minute, is like a stock price. The leader's credibility goes up and down during the day, during the month, over a quarter, over a year, and it goes up and down based on a number of things, but I'd like you to think about two in particular that I think are the drivers of credibility. The first is the quality of the decisions that the leader makes. If the leader is making great decisions comfortably and quickly, their credibility, their stock price will go up. If the leader's decisions are bad decisions made slowly, the credibility will go down. The second input to credibility is the quality of a leader's interactions with people. Does that leader understand people? Does that leader understand how to get the best out of people? So if a leader has a track record of great decisions and a track record of great interactions with people, they'll have high credibility, and because of that, will have willing followers. Message number 5. We're losing ground in North America, and we're losing ground fast. The fact of the matter is that we have in North America a relatively undistinguished record in, let's call it, the new economy. Now, set aside Apple and Amazon and eBay. They are unbelievable successes, and they are exactly the kind of transformational organizations that we need, but we need more of them. And those organizations that get all the press coverages, quite frankly, are not typical. They're not the average company. The real economy is out there in middle North America, in what was the Rust Belt. It's in the smaller towns and the smaller businesses, and they're not sexy and they're not glamorous and they don't get the headlines, but that's where the majority of us live and work. And what we're failing to do is gain our appropriate share of opportunity for the broader economic welfare, social welfare, employment welfare of our countries. We're not getting our share of the new opportunities. We're not leveraging the most important resources which we have, which is our diversity. Diversity in an ethnic, in a religious, in a gender way. Diversity in the new economy is an absolute essential. But if we don't act, if we don't figure out this new stuff, we're going to fall behind, and it's a horrendous thing to think about. We could, in fact, in North America, become third tier. And the reason for that is that around us is emerging a new set of competitors, and they're a little hungrier, a little more aggressive, a little more on the balls of their feet, and these are not the places that we typically hear about of India and China. They're places like Croatia, Turkey, Mexico, Vietnam. They're about companies and countries that are doing new things, and they're not on our radar screen, and yet we're not doing enough. And so it's the threat of this next wave of new competition that should be of concern. All of that put together suggests that we need to rethink a bunch of stuff. And let me put it to you this way. Thinking, the quality and the depth of thinking is the raw material of all great leaders. And yet, we've become fixated on the outputs. We tend to have an activity bias, and we've shortchanged the input side of the equation, which is about the quality of thinking that goes into our businesses, into our strategies, into the things we do. And that if we really want better outcomes, and we do, then we need to focus on better inputs, which is a better quality of thinking. It's no different than that old saying of garbage in, garbage out. So here are the things I think we need to rethink. I think we need to rethink the type of leadership we need. The whole frame for leadership has changed. Why? Not because we wanted it to change, but because the external context has changed. And those pressures of change are huge. And you know the list: social change, demographic change, globalism, technology. And as a result, there's a big, big difference between the transactional leadership of the past 25 years and the transformational leadership that we need now. And we have to begin to believe that there actually is knowledge to be gained from the study of business failures. And there's two wonderful places that we can go to begin to educate ourselves in this. The first is a landmark report from the AMA on stall point. It's called the Stall Point Study. And the second would be to go to Jim Collins' book, How the Mighty Fall. Both of these remind us of what Schumpeter said back in the 1930s about creative destruction, and that the breakthrough solutions emerge out of failure. And they're dependent upon a couple of things, and there's some lessons that we can learn from failure, because it's dependent on the rate of failure. And it's not voodoo economics here. It really is about failing fast to succeed sooner. Number two, it's about that leader's learning rate, that ability to absorb and synthesize. And then key to learning, is the leader's rate of abandonment, of that willingness to make decisions on what to get rid of or what to stop doing, because that's what creates the capacity for the new stuff. Rethink number two. It's about the leadership traits, competencies that we need. It's about a different type of being smart. Howard Gardner, several years ago, wrote a great book on multiple intelligence, and he was right. There's different ways of being smart. I happen to think that there are 4 big challenges that leaders face, and I think there are 8 leadership competencies that kind of support them. So let me go through the prescription here about what I think those challenges are and what those competencies are. The first bucket of challenges is around sense making and sense shaping. If a leader understands how to make sense out of the world and can shape that sense into a new way, like a Steve Jobs did, then we have a leader for the future. The competencies that go within this, there are 2 of them: CQ, which you should think of as contextual intelligence, sense-making, situational understanding, and SQ, or strategic intelligence, which is the sense-shaping and the weaving of the opportunity into a narrative. The second bucket of challenges for the modern leader are around clarity and credibility, how to make sure that things are clear, and how to be credible as a leader and as an organization. And there are two intelligences, if you like, in this bucket. I've referred to them already. EQ, the way in which you treat people, and that goes well beyond character and integrity, and there's been enough written and said about it that it's almost hard to believe there are people that don't get it. And the second is DMQ, or decision-making intelligence, which is that ability to frame and position and resolve kind of the wicked challenges and make great decisions on the back of the wicked challenges. The third bucket is around leaders being able to help their people and their organizations understand and gain new perspective. Here again, I think there are two measurable and observable behavioral competencies. INQ, innovation intelligence, which if you look at it from the input side is about the behaviors that cause the output of innovation. So we're talking about curiosity and drive and ambition. And the second competency here under understanding and perspective is AQ, ambiguity intelligence, the ability to cope with uncertainty without freezing, that ability to live in the gray, to understand that sometimes roughly right is good enough and not to be needing to lock everything down. The fourth bucket is about how the leader creates winning conditions and how that leader creates the environment that allows people to win. Two competencies here, TQ, which was talent intelligence, which is about a leader's ability to spot talent and to focus on the potential in people more than their performance. It's that being that scout, that talent scout. And the second competency here is COQ, or collaborative intelligence. And what I would say here is that collaboration is way different than compromise or consensus. And if all of this is kind of too much or even too complex, maybe we could distill modern leadership down to just one simple metric. And if you wanted to do that, I think you would focus on the leader's say-do ratio. And if the say-do ratio is less than 1-to-1, that leader's in trouble, won't have credibility, and won't have willing followers. Let's move on to rethink number 3, which is about the nature of human capital. Let me puncture a myth. The idea that people are our greatest asset is wrong. It's actually offensive. It's an outdated mental model that has all the wrong connotations about it. Employees are investors, not assets. And it's the level of discretionary investment that the leader in the organization can release that makes the difference. Every employee at every level gets to decide how much of themselves they're prepared to invest. That level of discretionary investment, how much heart and soul, passion and drive that they're prepared to put into their organization is in the hands of the employees. And that's why we need to treat them as investors, not financial investors, although that might be nice as well, but investors in giving more of themselves. See, the accounting profession has totally failed when it comes to the human capital balance sheet. The balance sheet of the modern corporation and the accountants that do all of that work that we all go through every year have failed to capture the cost, even in the footnotes, of ineffectiveness, underperformance, and poor leadership. And those costs, those contingent liabilities, can be huge in some companies, and we don't even, in 2014, on the cusp of 2014, we haven't figured out how to include this in what matters most to business people, which is the debits and credits. To get the investment that we need out of people, we need to focus on the investment climate. And to put it in more common parlance, that means the culture. And culture is like a brand. It's not the company that owns the brand of a product. It's the customers. It's not the company that owns the internal brand and determines its value. It's the employees. There's a huge opportunity for differentiation in this area of internal branding and employees as investors. And it's a big source of competitive advantage that's not being taken. You see, at the end of the day, safe havens and stability are really a bad environment for fresh thinking. On the other hand, chaos, turbulence create opportunity and value. And if you want to transform and shift, you need to make a shift in the way you think about your internal brand, and you've got to think about your culture. And in my world, I see two types of culture. I see companies that are trying to exploit what they have and squeeze the last bit out of it. And then there's this other group of companies that explore. So explore versus exploit, or if you want to put it a different way, defend versus discover. We're at a turning point. We're at a split in the path here about making a decision. What kind of culture do we want? When a culture rewards only results, when a culture gets seduced by sweat and activity, it actually gets mediocrity masquerading as success. You get short-term gains, but you don't get serial success. When you reward effort, on the other hand, you get innovation. When you reward the right kind of effort, you get sustainable performance. You allow ideas to explode in order to get breakthrough results. So we need cultures where wild ideas can collide. Quite frankly, we need cultures where wild ideas can have sex with each other, and out of that gets bred a breakthrough concept. Rethink number 4 is about the way we think and decide inside organizations. We're lucky here. There's been a good bunch of work done on design thinking, or sometimes what it's called is integrative thinking, which simply takes us back to what we should have already known, that trial and error and prototypes is a necessary part of moving forward, and that it's not about being perfect, it's not about being right, and that in fact needing to be right is a prison. And when we need to be right all the time, we get trapped in our mental models, in our bias, and in our perspectives. And like it or not, we do live in this wiki world. We do live in the world where roughly right and getting it right is the way to be, because in a fast-moving world, the chances of us being 100% right are just not there. So this brings us to understanding the value of SNA, which is known as social network architecture, which is really understanding not the org chart, but understanding the way things actually get done inside an organization, because an organization is nothing more than the sum total of all the decisions made by all of the people every day over time. And knowledge is a circumstance of time and space, and safe havens don't allow any space for new things to happen. But in a crazy world, brilliant things can happen. final rethink number 5, is about how strategy is formulated. You know, if you think about it, strategy should be the most exciting part of leadership. But all too often, it's bland and very safe. And so why? And I think we know the answers. Organizations don't like disorder, and yet we live in a disorganized world. So we're constantly trying to put a round peg into a square hole, and yet if we step back, if we listen to people like Henry Mintzberg of McGill University, he reminds us that strategic thinking is the key. It's not the strategic planning. Yet we in organizations put so much effort into the strategic plan and reworking it in decks and presentations, and we don't think enough about the quality of the thinking that goes into it. But we need, in a crazy, chaotic world, we need big leaps, not slow, linear increments, and that becomes more about the quality of your insight and your foresight and your peripheral vision, and that is how value gets created. And value gets created through better strategic thinking, and it creates value at the fringe. Value isn't created in any company, in any industry, at the core of what they do. It's at the fringes of what they do. It's about the new stuff, and that's where share of opportunity matters, not share of market. And yet I see so many companies still focused on tracking and monitoring their share of market. Well, you could be following share of market right over the cliff. The question that you should be asking and what you should be following is our company getting a disproportionate share of opportunity? And it's share of new opportunity that matters. And so that brings in a whole different way of thinking, and that's the strategic thinking piece. So let's come back to the business case for all of this, because there is a business case. Monumental changes taking place in the world. Business leaders in different places are transforming the way business is conducted. New leaders and new companies from new economies and new countries are redefining what leadership means in the modern world. They are providing their talented followers with something ambitious to engage their passions, and they're making bold, imaginative changes to how their leaders are developed and how their organizations are managed. They're making changes to the competencies that are required for success, and they're making changes to the way people are led. We call these companies hidden champions. And this is a bit of work that's been done in Europe for the last 10 years about some unbelievably successful companies like Bider in Iceland, Gallagher in New Zealand, International SOS in Singapore. Hidden champions are small companies in niche markets who have disproportionate, typically over a 90% market share. These hidden champions are the ones that threaten our relevance. These are the ones that are potentially putting us at a competitive disadvantage. They're flying under the radar. They're being outstanding at what they're doing. They're innovating in all sorts of different ways. And we're still working on the old model and how we might make a slow transition. That's not going to work. We're falling behind because others are running faster. I'll argue that they're running in a new and different direction, that about 4 years ago they took a turn and we didn't take it. They're running with a long-term game plan, and they're running to win as opposed to avoiding loss. And yes, it is true that in North America we're strong and safe, and yes, we've weathered and survived the global economic crisis. But it's not just about stability for the sake of stability. It's about what we do with what we have. So I'll leave you with some big ideas. The first is about changing some habits. There's an old saying in the field of organizational psychology that we acquire our bad habits in good times and our good habits in bad times. Well, things have been pretty good in North America for a long time, so guess what? We have some bad habits, and we've got to get over it. We could even say that in North America, we're suffering from a severely dislocated shoulder. We've been doing such a good job of patting ourselves on the back that we've actually thrown our shoulder out of its socket. Big idea number 2. We need transformational leaders. We need them now. We need them now before the opportunity evaporates. They're a special breed. They're not grown on the same old farm that the old leaders were born on. They are, in fact, a little rebellious. They may even be deviants in a certain way. But goodness, we live in a disorganized, kind of chaotic world. We need leaders for the future, not the past. We need leaders with new competencies. We need leaders that can tap into the energy of these followers and get this discretionary investment. We need leaders that understand the new contract between leaders and followers. So we need to take some bold leaps of faith here. Big idea number 3, middle management. I really do believe that we've done a lousy job in recognizing this constituency. I think that we've gutted many of their opportunities to grow. I think we perhaps have even created a subservience mentality in our middle management ranks, a hostage mentality. We fostered a mindset of compliance, not creativity, and we have failed to adjust. And it's not too late, but we better do something. Fresh idea number 4 is about fresh thinkers, these transformational thinkers that we need. And you need these thinkers when you get to key intersections, when you get to what Andy Grove many years ago called strategic inflection points. You know, quite frankly, my friends, we don't need karaoke capitalism. We don't need imitation. Imitation is cheap. There's too much of it. Imitation's not the real thing. It's a second-rate copy. And there's a huge, huge difference between the way you think in these kind of environments versus the past. And I'm going to suggest to you it's like the difference between jazz and classical music. And being excellent in Beethoven is hugely different than being excellent as Wynton Marsalis. The situation, the environment, the moment should dictate the music we play. And we live in jazz times. We live in times that are fluid and chaotic. There is no script. There is no score. There is no precedent for us to follow. Jazz, and anyone who loves it knows that at the heart of jazz and jazz leadership are 3 things: inspiration, imagination, and improvisation. So I could argue that Dizzy Gillespie or Wynton Marsalis or Oscar Peterson are the better leader models for us to follow, because transactional leadership is not what we want, nor is transitional leadership. We're in a very exciting time of transformation, and those transformational competencies that I spoke about earlier, if they're balanced as a suite, they become interdependent. They provide a new and different level of leadership sophistication, but they're not the general bland garden variety of leadership competencies that we've used to date. No, it's different. It's competencies that reflect the way in which leaders look at the world, the opportunity they see. It's competencies around the way people look at at people and how they can spot potential in people. And it's competencies about the way you lead a group of people in a jazz ensemble with passion. Those are the competencies, and that's a conversation, and that's some straight talk that I think we need to be having inside our companies and at the national level, because the rest of the world out there is coming at us, and they're not encumbered in the same way that we are. So thanks for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions that any of you have, and I see that some have been coming in.
We do. We have a few questions that have come in so far, Doug, and if you have questions for Doug Williamson, you can ask them by using the chat feature on your player in that lower left corner. So you can just type the questions into us and click send to send it on over. Doug, let's start with a question that came in because you brought up there about the global competitors for North America. Someone had asked, have you found any of these hidden champions within North America?
Yeah, there are any number of hidden champions in North America. They tend to be in those smaller towns, states, and provinces. They are the ones that are struggling for venture capital. They tend also to be in the very opposite of the .com kind of world. Let me give you an example. Some of us might think that janitorial and sanitation supplies is a go-nowhere industry. I would argue that with you. I recently was in Las Vegas at the international conference of people that are in what they like to refer to as the green and clean industry. And there's any number of companies in that industry that are trying to create breakthroughs in how do we create a cleaner and greener environment. But and then we've got companies that are in packaging, and the point here is that these are industries that don't necessarily grab the headlines of the Wall Street Journal. They are in the remaking or transformation of historical industries that are being forced, quite frankly, to change. So if you want to find a hidden champion, go into the small factories in any kind of town over 100,000 people anywhere in North America or in Mexico or in the world, and I guarantee you're going to find them. But they're struggling, and they're really not getting any love, and they're not getting any help, and yet they understand the power of the Internet, and they understand that their market is global. We need to do a better job of supporting them and identifying them. So there's lots of them around.
And I could say to add on to that, Doug brought up that notion of the clean and green industry. It also can expand from there to the industries that interact with that particular business. I know of someone who is with an IT outfit that is looking at ways to change how those companies are able to connect their product with the customers. So once again, one of these organizations that would be considered a hidden champion part of that can be to spur on the people and companies with whom they work every day.
Yeah, Andrew, you're absolutely right, and the term we should all begin using is the ecosystem for that. You see, if you're GE, you have your own ecosystem because you control it. But if you're a small company, you've got to create your ecosystem with your suppliers, your vendors, and your customers. So absolutely right. It's the multiplier effect of getting the relationships or the ecosystem right.
And there are more and more opportunities for that every single day. But let's move on to a question that came in, and I think this is one that a number of people have asked or are probably considering asking, which is if the acknowledgement that there's a leadership crisis, that there's this need to rethink and have these transformational changes, the barrier, it seems, is convincing organizational decision makers that these imperatives need to be put into place. What do you recommend? And as this person puts it, who do you see orchestrating this transformation?
Sure. Great question. Let me give you a history lesson, and I may not be perfect in this, but I'm going to be roughly right. I think if you study revolutions, politically around the world over time, you will discover that revolutions succeed or fail based on what the middle class decides to do and who they want to support. Put it another way, the middle class can either have the most to lose or the most to gain, and so it's when the body of an entity decides to shift that real change happens. So in a business, that really means middle management. So real change happens from within the belly of the organization, from within middle management. And the catalyst for change is a discussion about thinking differently about the products, services, and industry. So it may start with a new approach to the strategic plan, whereby the leadership team invites a group of the organization's best thinkers, forget age, gender, anything about it, just bring 6 of the best thinkers in an organization together with the senior team and spend a day just thinking about the world, thinking about the trains that are coming at us with the headlights on that aren't going to change. Think about all the new ways. So freshen up the strategic thinking process to stimulate the mindset shift at the top, to break the mental models, and use a vibrant cohort or group of people from within the belly of the organization to share those thoughts. Here's what happens when you do it. First of all, the gray-haired people around the board table wake up because they actually know things are changing. They just don't know how to make sense of it. And the younger people, the thinkers, love the opportunity to be invited to the table, so it becomes a win-win, and you begin to start to change the thinking. You put a different set of glasses on. So it begins in the middle, and it ends with thinking about the business in new and different ways.
Let's go a little further with that idea for 1 second, because someone had asked about, you talked about that belly of the organization. Someone had asked about how you go about hunting for those potential leaders from within your organization. I think the key word there is within, because all too often so many companies look to go outside their own organization to bring in the new and capable ideal leaders.
Yeah, I guess I'm old-fashioned in this regard. I cannot understand why so many companies spend so much money on executive recruiting and bringing in new talent. I'd love to see that number have to be revealed on a financial statement, because I think it would shock some people. So developing the leaders within is the best and the cheapest or most cost-effective way of developing leaders. But in order to do it, you need leaders that are talent scouts. It's like what you need on a hockey team or a baseball team or a football team. You need leaders who've got an eye for talent and can look down into the organization for someone that's really junior and say, I see something in that person. And it's that competency, it's that talent scouting ability, it's that talent intelligence that we don't do anything near good enough for to test our leaders, and we have to make a big paradigm shift. So I can tell you that if you recognize and reward the average man and woman in the organization, 99 times out of 100 they'll delight you. But they are really taking a disproportionate share of the pressure and pain. And yet we think that the antidote is, well, we'll just use an employment agency or a headhunter. What would make us think that there's better out there than what we have inside? And the only reason would be if you've done such a terrible job over time that you absolutely have no bench strength. But I think even in those companies, I think a different lens to look at leaders will actually enable you to identify them. But the focus here is on potential, not on performance. I can buy performance on the street. What I want is locked-in potential. Who do I have that has runway for the future. And so the whole equation changes as well.
We've got about 5 minutes remaining with Doug Williamson. He's the author of Straight Talk on Leadership. And we had a couple more questions come in. I was just reviewing a couple of them here because they're rather similar in nature, particularly as it applies to someone who feels that they're trapped under, as this person puts it, the heel of middle management. Now, if you have a frontline employee who has some of these transformational ideas or abilities, is there a way to liberate that person from a middle management culture that isn't innovation focused?
Yeah, two things that I would say quickly. I referred or alluded to a hostage mentality. I'm of the firm opinion that in organizations everywhere, we have hostages. And you don't have to go back very far in history to learn about things like the Stockholm Syndrome and the whole hostage phenomena. I really worry when we've got people that think of themselves as hostages, because I go back to that Steve McQueen movie where he constantly refused to be a captive in a POW camp, and he just kept trying to break out, and he kept going back in the clink. Quite frankly, if you feel like you're a hostage, get out and get out quickly. Do not allow yourself to be a hostage. Hostages allow it to happen to them, and if you don't feel you can be a force for change, don't allow yourself to be abused, if you like, which is kind of the hostage mentality. The second thing I could encourage you to do is pick up Seth Godin's book, The Dip, which I think is brilliant in terms of a prescription for people for what they should do when they feel that they're stuck or they're in a rut. So Seth Godin's book, The Dip, to me is still the place to go for how to break free of traps.
And fortunately, unlike Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, you won't need the aid of a motorcycle jump over barbed wire to get out of your organization. At least we hope you won't require that. Let's conclude with, because you've given us so much great information, Doug, about good ideas for moving forward and just ways to shake up an organization. But it would be remiss if we didn't talk about a negative for one moment. And someone had asked about, what do you consider to be derailing leadership behaviors that every organization should be on the lookout for in its leadership base?
Yeah, well, I'll be with Jack Welch on this. It's lack of candor. If you get inside an organization and there's not straight talk, if people are candy coating, if people are passive aggressive, you should be really concerned. That's a 3-alarm fire in my mind. So I look for the quality of the dialogue, which, by the way, you walk into the lobby of any company and you hang out in the lobby for 5 minutes, I guarantee you get a sense of the culture through the dialogue. And so I think, what you do is, what is the quality and honesty of the dialogue? And if there's lots of dialogue and it's at the right level and it's candid, you're okay. If it's the opposite, you're in trouble. So to me, that's my kind of thumb in the air test for what do we got going on inside a company or a leadership team.
Now, if you look on screen right now, you'll see Doug's contact info, and one of those is his Twitter handle. He's @BluntLeader. I recommend, if you don't already follow Doug, make sure you after this webinar is over, go into Twitter and follow Doug @BluntLeader. He left a tweet the other day that said, "Remember to embed a teachable point of view in everything you do as a leader." I think he's left us with numerous teachable points here today. Doug Williamson, thank you so much for being with us on Soundview Live.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.